All right, and the topic of the day, of course, is the Beatles. Now and Then, the last Beatles song featuring all four of the original members of the Beatles. And it's been out for a couple hours this morning. I've lived with it and listened to it, I don't know, a half dozen times or whatever. And just going to give you my honest reaction to it. Does anybody care? I don't know. Whatever. Hey, I got to make some content like everybody else. So, hey, I'm Rob. If you haven't seen any of my other videos, I've been playing guitar since 1978. I've written hundreds of songs myself. I am a graduate of the Berklee College of Music in Boston. I'm not saying that makes me any more qualified to react to this latest and last Beatles release any more than anybody else is, but hey, I'm just going to throw in my 2 cents here. And this is where I'm sitting right now with it. Maybe a couple days from now, I'll feel something different. Although, I'm kind of, underwhelmed, I would say, overall by what they managed to come up with. It's my reaction to it based on the fact that I know this song very well, that I owned these John Lennon cassette demos for 30 years now. There was a release where they put them all on there called Free as a Bird. It was like a bootleg-ish release, but it was, available, widely enough that a lot of people ended up picking it up. They pressed enough copies of it, I guess, that it got around at different record stores, etc. Anyway, so like I said, I know this song. It's not new to me. I expected a little more, actually, of the actual demo ending up in the Beatles' final version. They really cut out what I think is a very important part of this song, but I'll get to that in a sec. So anyway, what's going on? Well, today the Beatles released their last song. I gotta keep doing quotes. Their last song as a group, Now and Then. If you don't know the history, very briefly, it was a cassette demo that Yoko Ono presented to the Beatles and said, hey, what can you guys do with this? That's back when the other 3 Beatles were still living in the mid-90s. And they finished a song called Free as a Bird, which I think really is a good representative song, in the Beatles songwriting canon. It's a good quality, interesting, heartfelt, emotional song. And then they worked on a second one called Real Love, which is okay. It's a decent song, but kind of more traditionally, composed as far as songwriting goes, and didn't stand out as much. They were able to kind of weave Lennon's vocals from this cassette tape demo into there, but the vocals sounded kind of weird, warbly, almost like you were listening to them through a telephone receiver. They were there, and it was John Lennon. It was the best they could do 30 years ago. Anyway, they had a third demo. Actually, there were 4 of them. One of them was a song called Grow Old With Me, which is a really good song. And if you want to hear that, Glenn Campbell did a cover of it shortly before he died and did a real nice job with it. But this 4th song that they had, Now and Then, they tried to work on it for a couple hours. They played a little drums, they played a little guitar, they listened to it, they thought about it, and they just kind of all eventually decided, it's just, we're not going to be able to do much with this. So it sat for 30 years. Not even half finished, partially finished. And I think Paul McCartney said, over the last 30 years, at least a half dozen times in interviews and things like that, we're going to get back to it, we're going to finish it. So I think it was just one of those things where he had said it so many times that he was just looking for a reason, something to come along and kind of, give him the push he needed to actually put the thing together. And that happened in the last couple of years since COVID, when they invented this technology that is AI-based, and they were able to take John Lennon's vocal and separate it out from the piano that he was playing. Of course, the original recording is a cassette that was from a recorder, a cheap boombox recorder sitting on top of his piano. So everything was intermingled and intermixed. There were no separate tracks for them to pull from. It was all mixed up together with the sounds of the city and traffic and the Dakota apartment building and, who knows, Yoko, cooking scrambled eggs in the background or whatever was happening. So they were finally able to, extract with the help of machine learning and AI. They didn't make anything new. They simply listened to the recording. The computer identified which of the parts of the waveform were John Lennon singing, and they were able to pull that out and separate it. Once they had that, I think Paul was inspired enough to say, all right, now we've got just this clean vocal separated from everything else. Now we can build everything else up underneath it. So Paul was able to replay the piano part, of course, in a studio, not, in an apartment, into a cassette player. Cleaned up the piano part, replayed the piano part, along with John's vocal, and then they added, Ringo's drums underneath it. Ringo, I think, played a little bit of shaker, percussion, tambourine, maybe I hear at the end. And they already had some of George Harrison's guitar parts. I don't think they're perfectly appropriate for this song. They're kind of funky, and it doesn't really fit the mood. It's more like a up-tempo dance number part, that he was playing along with, as far as the way he was strumming and playing his guitar back in 1995 when they did this. But they weaved that in there, and it's in there, and it's definitely the part that George played. And so, of course, George had to be somewhere on this recording, and that's where he is. And then Paul thought, well, George would have done a cool slide guitar solo, so I'm going to recreate something that I think George would have played. And he did, and it's not really exemplary. It doesn't really stand out. It's there, and it, expresses the idea that, hey, George was this great guitarist who did these interesting, things with slide guitar. So that's what we got, basically. And they threw it all together. Like I said, they cut out a big section of the demo, this I Don't Want to Lose You, if you're familiar with the Lennon demo. That whole section is gone, and that's really was, melodically, harmonically, in the structure of the song, something that really kind of held it together, that made it stand out from just any other average song or whatever that you would come up with just on a whim. But so what do I think of what the Beatles did with it? I feel like, they had the elements and they just said, all right, let's just get this done. Like, I don't feel like there's a lot of passion, love, feeling behind this. I feel like they could do it. They find a way to, they finally found a way just to complete it and, get it out there, release it, and, kind of get it off, the Paul's plate or whatever of things that he wants to do. So it's out, and like I said, they cut out the really interesting part of the Lennon song. So it was kind of a, strangely structured song anyway, and I was kind of wondering, how are they going to put all this together? Because, like, different keys, different feels, different things. You get used to hearing it because it's in the demo, but I thought, how are they going to pull this off and, like, transition between these parts? And they really kind of didn't do that. They just cut out this whole difficult section, and they just, left just two sections of the song together, basically, the verse and the chorus. There's not a lot of Paul vocal. I expected maybe a new Paul vocal, new lyrics, a new section that, again, they didn't put a lot of work into this like they would have 30 years ago. They just basically said, let's get it done. Let's do kind of, really the bare minimum of what we need to do to call this a Beatles song. We've got Ringo playing on it. We've got Paul, playing some bass on it. He's playing, I would say, unnecessarily busy bass part on this song. Like, he's just, I don't know what he's trying to do in this song, make his presence known maybe or whatever. But again, I don't know if it's perfectly appropriate for the song, but it's Paul playing bass and it's in there. And, these guys are 80 years old now. So, whatever we get, I think we should be thankful for to some degree. But anyway, so, it's just kind of, I'm going to say, an average Beatles song at best. I don't think it rises above the demo in any way. I don't think it adds much to the demo. In a lot of ways, the demo was more interesting as far as a song, which was never finished or, really, worked on past the initial idea of what the song was, at least as far as we know that Lennon did. And then, like I said, they tried to work on it. It was in bad shape. It was one of the, it was actually the worst recording, just technically, that they had in '95. George Harrison said it was a bunch of junk. He didn't want to deal with it. They kind of just packed up and left, and that was it. But so they have finished it. It does exist, and I'm glad they did. I'm glad I get to hear what Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr think the Beatles would have done on a song like this. But other than just some real kind of by the numbers strings, there isn't a lot that they've added to it. It's just basically a verse, a chorus. There's an instrumental section, like I said, with that slide guitar in there. It really doesn't jump out at you or anything. It's just kind of like just going through the motions almost, and like, all right, we got to get this thing out, get it finished. I think they're planning, banking on the fact that just hearing John Lennon's voice, of course, is going to really resonate with a lot of people, which I'm sure it will. His voice sounds a lot better in this version. It doesn't sound like it's through a telephone receiver, but at the end of the day, he was singing a demo. He was not singing out. He was in an apartment, not a studio. I'm sure, I'm always conscious, like if I'm in the house and someone else is there, like I'm not belting it out. Like I'm just going to sing the part into the cassette recorder so I remember the part and know what it is and can have some idea how it sounds with the, chords underneath it or whatever. And that's what his vocal is. So I think, you kind of wish like he was like elongating some of the words and accenting some of the different things, that he sings, but he's really just like kind of just reading words off of paper, reading the lyrics, and just, singing it, at the end of the day into a cheap old boombox, just so he knows what the song is. He remembers the melody later on. If he wanted to revisit it later on, he would have enough of the song recorded to be able to go back and remember it and move on from there. And that's what they've taken and, built up as this whole Beatles demo. But when you actually listen to the way Lennon is singing and, how he's expressing these ideas, you kind of want for, like, of course you want him to come back, from the great beyond and do a real vocal on this song that matches the instrumentation. But, of course, that's never going to happen. And we just, like I said, at the end of the day, have to be happy with what we got here. And it's an okay effort by the Beatles. A lot of people, just because it's the Beatles and because it's John, will love it and buy it and cherish it. And I certainly don't want to cast aspersions on anyone who thinks it's fantastic or wonderful or amazing, and good. I hope it touches a lot of people. I mean, it's the Beatles in 2023. They released Love Me Do in 1962, 61 years ago. So, hey, how about that? Whoever thought we'd even have this? So, all right, those are my thoughts on the Beatles now and then. And like I said, I'll keep listening to it, and maybe a few more things will come to light as I, get more and more familiar with their recording of it. But that's where I'm at, right now. And my doggy's barking at me, so I better go. All right, later.